pass away.
We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is Dr. Cosby Stone. He's from Vanderbilt. He's with the Allergy, Sinus, and Asthma Relief Program there, where they do great work and can answer almost any question you might have about allergies. And it is the season for that, but I know many of you probably suffer from it year-round, right? So,
that's right.
Let's take Robert, waited through the break. Robert, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi, Robert.
Hi, Robert.
You both look so wonderful today. May I wish you both, even though either one of you sneezed, the blessings from our Father.
Thank you,
Thank you much, sir.
And to your family also.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Nick, I can picture you with a bandana on. A kid the same age as me, pretending he was a hippie back in the early 70s.
Yeah, I'm the easy rider. That's it. On the mower. It's on the lawnmower I do that.
Did you wear the red strip or the blue?
Yep, I read that. It's a red bandana. And I've got an old one in the drawer.
The lawnmower outlaw.
Yeah, right. Hey, man, anything to keep me from sneezing, so...
Yeah, well, I'm going to get back to the, reality, but
sure.
Thank you for allowing me the chance to speak to you. The 15-second delay that when I'm watching TV kind of confuses me, because I like to look at you both in the eye when I'm speaking to you.
I understand. That makes it tricky, but yeah, just talk on the phone. You're doing great.
Oh, thank you. I know I just woke up and just started my coffee, so I'm just getting ready to go.
All right.
Oh, I grew up in what the Indians called Chicago, the smelly onion. Now, it was difficult. We had coal plants everywhere from Edison. There were stinks in that city, even as a little kid growing up in the 60s and 70s, becoming a man, what I thought was a man, until the 80s. I left Chicago. I've been in Nashville now for 12 years. I love the smells around Nashville. There's nothing that stinks like the stink coming out of Chicago. But here's the thing. I never had an allergy to anything, and Chicago allows us to have every opportunity to be supposedly attacked by allergens. So I come here, I'm amongst the trees, the birds, the flowers, the wonderful people, the blessed people. And next thing I know, my wife moves us into an apartment complex, and unbeknownst to me, by the fourth time in succession, and within 4 years, the people upstairs flooded this apartment.
Oh, boy.
So, well, what do you think would happen? Mold built up, and I became somehow, it attacked me. I ended up 4 years ago having to go to my favorite ear, nose, and throat clinic. It used to be eyes, ears, nose, and throat, but they got rid of the eyes.
Yeah.
And he says, well, you got polyps all throughout every cavity, orifice of my sinus cavity. I said, so what do? You got some kind of acid you could spray up there? He goes, no, we have to operate.
Oh, man.
Do you,
I went through the operation. He prescribed me lifetime, he said, some Ticasone and Panatase. And he explained to me why I would need them both.
Yeah.
And it didn't come to mind to me until I just started the idea of calling you gentlemen, that he prescribed those two meds because the complex, after I had Metro come out here and verify the mold, the station refused to do anything, refused to put me, my wife, and my son in a hotel while the whole system here, these walls, was demoldized.
Wow.
Is that a real word? Demoldized?
Demoldized. Well, he sounds to, well, then that's a different issue for you there about whether or not they should have helped you on that, and I think they should have. But yeah, okay, what he described there, you were talking about it earlier, again, the flooding, the moisture that came in, the mold. He didn't have allergies until this happened, and he must have been exposed to a higher concentration than ever before.
Right, and so I think that, two things can happen. Two elements of your story are interesting to me. One is I never had allergies before I moved to Nashville, and that's a very common story. We have a lot of folks who say, well, I've been here, and I can usually play a parlor game with them. I say, well, how long were you here? It was probably 2 years or 3 years before you started having symptoms. And they're like, yeah, that's right. And we have to be exposed to things for about 2 or 3 years, a new allergen, before we become allergic. And if I was going to guess, and if we were to do allergy testing on him and find, that he is allergic to things in Nashville, it's probably things that he wasn't exposed to when he was in Chicago.
Exactly.
Because we got different plants, we've got different molds, we've got different dust mites, things like that. Dust mites actually don't do quite as well in Chicago as they do here in Nashville. So again, and then the second element is the humidity and water damage, based problems. Finally, the third interesting element is just the nasal polyps. And so there are certain people who have nasal polyps and they just get enormous nasal polyps.
Little bumps in your
Well, what
sinuses?
it really is it starts out as like a collection of mucus under the surface of the lining of your nose, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's just this inflammatory water balloon that's sort of blocking your airway. So the surgeons have to scrape it out and remove it. If those things keep growing back, one thing to think about is whether you're actually also sensitive to aspirin and ibuprofen and things like that, because there are certain people who just get so many nasal polyps. They're also allergic to those medications, and we have specific treatments for those people who have just major amounts of polyps.
But ibuprofen can lead to more growth of polyps?
Yeah, what happens is that is that for certain people they seem to be a little bit low in a certain enzyme, and so they get asthma, they get allergies, they get nasal symptoms, and then they get these giant polyps. If you get them on the aspirin, you actually counteract the enzyme imbalance. So we do that in our clinic. Is that it's a very rare person, but it's somebody. It's typically somebody with severe asthma and just tons of nasal polyps that needs to be thought about for being on aspirin.
Makes sense what he said about moving from Chicago. Now, I'll say this. This time of year for me, yeah, it's a little rough for me in Nashville. But when I go visit my wife's family in Knoxville, it's a whole different ballgame. You knock it up a notch. Or one year at this time, we went over to Fall Creek Falls.
Right.
Holy cow, was it just, it's probably similar, but you know as well as I do, the farther I believe east you go in this state, the greener in a lot of ways, and there's just more vegetation, it seems like. You go west, and Memphis, not as much. Knoxville knocks me on my butt.
Yeah.
I mean, if I went there this weekend, the symptoms that I have now would be magnified tenfold.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you go there enough to be sensitive, but not enough to be tolerant.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah. It's not that often, but I mean, when you go, so would you recommend before you make a trip like that, if you know it's going to happen, just to boost up the amount of meds you're taking?
That's right. Yeah, if you know that you're going to go somewhere, if you're somebody who, like, when you try to go down south, toward the coast, and you know that when you get there that there's something there that's going to give you trouble, get started on your medications a week beforehand, or boost your medications a week beforehand. Yeah, think about it ahead of time. The same thing for travel. Now, this is another piece of advice that I can give people, because when you're getting on an airplane and you're getting ready to go travel and your allergies are already messed up, what can you do, to keep yourself from having that the airline pressure that you get in your nose? Yeah. So there is an over-the-counter nasal spray called oxymetazoline. It used to be the oxymetazoline, also known as Afrin, or the cousins thereof. And I will never recommend it to you in any other circumstance, because it will cause you to have, the more you use it, the more you're going to get addicted to it.
Right.
But for up to 3 days, when you're having a cold, it's really great. Or if you've got to get on an airplane, because it will decongest you immediately, you can make it through that airplane travel, because you're going to get some swelling with the changes in pressure on the airplane. But that one will open you up enough that the pressure changes won't affect you.
That's a great suggestion. I'm glad you brought that up as we start wrapping up the show, because there are folks who have allergies at this time of year that may go and buy Afrin or neosynephrine or some of these, all right?
Don't use it for allergies.
And when you, okay, you don't use it for allergies, or no, you said you may be if you're flying, though, right?
Yeah, you can use it. I will allow you to use it for up to 3 days.
For allergies or just for flying?
Well, if you've got a cold or if you're flying.
Okay, but not for allergies.
Don't use it for allergies. Yeah, you'll get stuck on it.
Oh, yeah. He's not kidding. Now, I haven't, but I mean, and it's true. Have you ever used it? You spray it in there when you're clogged, and it feels like someone put a pipe cleaner in there.
It feels like heaven.
It works. All of a sudden, boom, your nose is clear as a whistle. And I had a good friend of mine years ago who just, really needed it, and before you know it, it's a couple of weeks, and boy, he had to go to the doctor, and he basically was addicted. And the time, your nasal membranes get more swollen when you come off it. And he went through, it was incredibly miserable while he was being weaned off it.
That's right.
I got to be honest with you, Doc. You mentioned that to me, and I would definitely consider using it if I fly and I'm clogged. But I'm afraid to even use that one day, because it is so effective. And I just worry that, even one time using it, when you come off it, your nose is still a little, like, I don't know, raw or sensitive to it, it seems like to me. Yeah. Doing it 3 days, I'd be afraid that my nose would adjust to be addicted to it, and then I'd have to come off it, and then I'd have 3 days not breathing through my nose.
I think that's fair. And some people, they just say, I know I'm going to love it so much that I'm not going to want to stop it.
And it doesn't get you high or anything.
No, it doesn't get you high. No, it just opens everything up. And when you're somebody who's used to being, like, so clamped down, it feels like heaven.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, So the warning for those kinds of over-the-counter things is that you can get stuck on them. You know, the same thing with oral Sudafed, right?
Yep.
You know, people get stuck on oral Sudafed, and the danger is that, you know, yes, these are over-the-counter medications, but you got to talk about with your doctor if you're going to use them. Because
how long do oral Sudafed? 3 days?
Same thing. Yeah, same thing. I wouldn't use.
I didn't know that about Sudafed as much. The oral Sudafeds, if you get too much, your body gets so used to that you need it every day.
Yeah, you can get really kind of stuck on it as far as your nose goes.
Yeah.
So the final thing is that I will say that that class of medications are not to be used for people who have blood pressure problems. If you've got high blood pressure, they will jack up your blood pressure.
That too.
You know, so be careful, because over the counter doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you.
No, that's absolutely true. Most of those, by the way, nose sprays will have smaller print, but it says do not use more than 3 days. I think they try to alert you to that.
I think they do.
But it works great, but man, don't overdo it on that. Anything real as we wrap it up, anything just in normal diet eating that can help with allergies at all? I'm just curious. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems
something
like
you drink or eat.
I would say that if you can spend, you know, I don't want to get in trouble with my dermatology colleagues, but if you can spend enough time out in the sunshine that you get some vitamin D without getting sunburned, vitamin D seems to help with allergy symptoms, especially if you have allergies in your skin.
Gotcha.
So like really dry eczema skin or hives, you're that kind of person, vitamin D seems to be helpful. You know, other things that are in our diet.
Or vitamins, anything that you can take.
Yeah.
I think, as you said, the healthier you are, the better your body will be able to deal with the allergy, right?
That's right, yep.
So whatever, eat well.
Eat well.
But there's not like some vitamin, aside from vitamin D, that maybe is going to just insulate you from allergies.
No, there's not going to be any magic. There's not going to be any magic bullet that I can offer you from your diet. I would just say eating a well-rounded diet. People who eat fruits and vegetables seem to have less allergies. You know, probably they're eating small amounts of things that are similar to pollens that are protective. So
look, a dust
eating
mite.
A well-balanced.
A dust mite. I'm kidding. Can you even see them? Well, are there dust mites around us here right now?
No, they wouldn't like it here. I mean, they might hang out in the carpet. You know, this is a pretty dry studio.
But no dust mites up here.
Yeah, no, not on here, because this is a dry surface. They wouldn't have anywhere to hide, and there's no dead skin cells that they could be harvesting. I mean, unless, you know.
We keep a clean studio. There are not dead skin cells around here. So when we have guests like him, we want to treat them right. Doc, thank you for coming on. It's always a pleasure, and I might add, an education. You're great.
Oh,
You're great.
I love it.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You can tell he likes his job. We're lucky we have doctors who like it and know what they're talking about. Thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure.
If we don't see you before then, we'll see you next year.
Yeah, I would love that.
All right, we'll take a break. I'll be back with a programming note right after this. Stay with us.
Get your